First of all, say thank you very much for tuning in. This is the first time we've tried a virtual town hall this year, and it's also with a very quick turnaround. Where originally, we found out the final budget version was going to be coming out on Thursday, and on Friday we made the decision to try and put together a town hall to be able to one, make sure folks had information about the budget, could have questions answered, and then to be able to give feedback. So appreciate everybody being able to jump in, and if you have feedback on the forum, the timeline, etc., please feel free to let us know afterwards. I do want to give a shout out. You already heard from her, but State Representative Christine Sinicki, and then also State Representative Ryan Clancy, who is on also. Just to give everyone the where we are at, we are expecting to be in the state Senate tomorrow to take up the budget, and the state assembly is expected to come in on Thursday to take up the budget. And looks like we figured out the video, so there you go. Awesome, thank you. With that, I'll turn it over to Representative Clancy. I see you on video. If you want to jump in first, and then Representative Sinicki as soon as you get on video, if that's all right.
I see Representative Sinicki on, so I'll defer to her.
Okay, so sorry, I'm on my tablet, so I was having computer issues, so I hope you can all see this. So welcome. So the Assembly did caucus this morning on the budget. We are going to be in on Thursday afternoon after the Senate sends it over. As far as I'm concerned right now, there is nothing in that budget that actually benefits 98% of the people in my district. I intend to vote no, but I'm happy to answer questions or comments when people, if people want to talk to me about it.
Yeah, I would echo that. Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll see. Maybe there's some amendments that actually do stick on Thursday, but I wouldn't anticipate it. And yeah, this budget does a great deal of harm, even in kind of new and unspecified ways. So we found out recently that there'll be a $50 million set aside for non-state projects that's going to be controlled by joint finance rather than any sort of panel of folks where it would be a bit more democratic. And it's things like that that's even on top of all the big things really give me pause, right? There's just not a good process to spend funds like that.
All right, so as we are, just to be clear, if folks haven't, I think everybody's getting used to Zoom, but the chat feature might not be open to the public, but the Q&A, so if you're looking at the bottom of your screen, it's 1, 2, 3 over under the Q&A section. If you type one in, you should be able to type one over there. But to start things off, just to give people a perspective on this, every 2 years the budget comes out, the governor issues his budget, and then over the course of the next few months, there's usually a few listening sessions. Those have all happened. The closest one to us in the 7th Senate District was over in Waukesha. It was the first one way back the day after the spring election in early April. They had 3 other listening sessions thereafter, including Eau Claire, Wisconsin Dells, and one of them up north in Minocqua was the last one towards the end of April. The Budget Committee, the Joint Finance Committee, shorthanded JFC for short, went through all of the pieces of the budget individually, waiting for the last piece to come out on Thursday. So if folks have been following, I like to put it akin to if you're watching a TV series, right? Maybe people lost track of the characters, lost track of the plot line somewhere in the middle. This is the season finale. This is the week, right? Where everyone needs to pay attention. This is it. So what was come up with by the Joint Finance Committee on Thursday is kind of it. We haven't heard of any changes coming out since then. Sometimes there is some technical changes or things that happen late. I have not heard from that. I don't know if a thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs up if you've heard of anything in the assembly from the reps. Otherwise, I think that we haven't heard of any of that. Of course, the next stop after this is it goes to Governor Evers' desk. He has 6 business days to be able to decide if he wants to veto, what he wants to veto, including line item vetoes, which he has done in previous budgets. So he has 6 days to do that, and that knocks out the 6 business days. So that knocks out the weekends, and that also knocks out the 4th of July. So it'll put it as either sometime late next week or early next week, depending on what time the thing finally wraps. Then, of course, it brings into the final piece, which is the possibility of a veto override by the governor. The governor could, they could override the governor's veto in the Senate because we are in the super minority. There's 22 state senators that are Republican, 11 that are Democrats. So they could override it in the Senate. We are the first house that is taking it up. So if there is an attempt to override the veto, it would have to go to the House of Origin, which in this case is the state Senate. Then it would move on to the state assembly, where there is a two vote margin of whatever, there's not a veto proof majority of Republicans there. There are 2 because there are 2 Democrats that prevent that. But if those 2 are out, they could potentially override any of those pieces. That has not happened in the last, with this governor at all. There has not been any attempts, but that could potentially change. So something to keep in mind of where we are. Oh, we got some questions. Oh, good. Awesome. Okay. Anonymous attendee says a top priority for governors has been clean water. Subsidizing biodigesters for factory dairy farms is incentivizing expansions. What does this budget do for subsidies to industrial farms? That's a good question. I don't think there's been any drastic changes in terms of what changed for what's happening with dairy farms and biodigesters. But I will see if my staff has any answers on that. I'm not on the ag committee. I don't know if my state representatives are. Would like to chime in. No.
I'm just looking through my binder now, but I'm not seeing anything in particular.
Yeah. On the ag, we'll see if we can come back to that one to find a more specific answers.
Actually, yeah, so biodigester grant programs, for folks who have the binder, it's paper 189, alt 1A, B1A. So let me pull that up.
Okay, we'll loop back to Ryan. And we'll move to the next question. Eric Tillich asks, I live in the city of Milwaukee, and considering the financial shape of the city, I would be inclined to support the budget to help alleviate the financial challenges facing MKE. I also understand the shared revenue model is a disaster for Milwaukee and the county, but I think this is about as far as the GOP is going to go. Your thoughts? So I think the thing to know is the shared revenue portion is done. That is finished. That was a separate bill that moved outside of the budget. When the governor proposed his budget, it also included all of the shared revenue changes. Those were pulled out separately and passed as a separate bill. That's also tends to be what happens with the overall budget too. So the budget itself is listed as Assembly Bill 43, Senate Bill 70. So if you start to see those numbers are shorthanded AB 40, SB 70. That's the overall budget, but we have an expectation that they might separate the finances out from the policy. We'll see what ends up happening. We haven't had the notice go forward yet. But what you're talking about in terms of the shared revenue and what happened with sales tax and everything else already went through. And so that's already finished. What happens in terms of aid to the county and aid to everyone else, the finances of that would go through the budget. I do not think the governor is expecting. I haven't heard of anybody asking for those to be line itemed out. But I would say that the overall, you guys hear the lawn care that's literally happening right outside my window. But that is not something that is going to be changing. The larger problems that we do end up seeing with this are in terms of things that could be spent in different areas of priority. That includes the pulling out of Badger Care, the Badger Care expansion. We are one of the last 11 states not to do that. In terms of funding for public transportation, that was pulled out of the general transportation budget and put out on its own, where it's potentially where it's going to be in competition for other dollars moving forward. That total amount, just so people have a number to go off of, is, I know we looked it up, is about 59.6 million that's getting pulled out to be in competition with the rest of the budget. So those things that still get cut that would go to the city of Milwaukee. I don't know if any of the reps want to, and just to be clear, the shared revenue plan does favor smaller communities over larger ones, just in terms of the percentage increase of what folks are getting.
Yeah, it was extremely frustrating to see that process play out. So I mean, and I mean, a veto of the budget, my understanding, would actually stop those shared revenue dollars from going out. But yeah, Milwaukee, both the city and the county's allocation was capped at 10% more than what we've gotten in previous years in terms of shared revenue. And you saw everybody else getting somewhere from 20 to up to 5,000% more. So yeah, there is certainly a relationship between the budget and that shared revenue, but both the shared revenue and the terrible policy provisions that we saw attached to it for the city of Milwaukee, especially, and to some extent for the county, are in place as of last Tuesday, I think, when the governor signed it.
Yep. All right. Okay, and just to give people just a quick update to, I kind of alluded to it, but just to give an overview of the big change that happened on Thursday, and that was the giant tax cut that changes the income taxes. Income taxes, where state government gets most of its funding from. It's income tax, sales tax, and then other fees. This would structurally change the way that the state brings in dollars, and would blow a $3.5 billion hole in not just this budget, but every budget moving forward. And of course, the way that it is broken down would benefit the richest people in the state. People making over $500,000 annually would be able to get a tax cut equivalent of a grand total of over $300 million. We actually got a chart that breaks down how everybody in the state would fare. And I'll just run through. So the top tax rate is currently 7.65%, and it would drop down to 6.5%, whereas the lowest tax rate is 3.54%. And just drops 0.04% to 3.5%. And then it takes the two middle tax brackets and cuts them down to 4.4%. And for the average household, the tax cut would benefit about, so if you're making average household income is between 80 and 90,000 annual, your tax cut on average would be $424 annually. In exchange, that would mean that we are not going to be able to fund public schools, do massive, the transportation projects, fund the university system long term. And I feel like with this quick turnaround in this budget, that's part of it that has not gotten the most attention. And then for those making $1 million or more, please raise your hands if you're in this one. There is exactly 7,291 people in the state of Wisconsin who fit that, and their decrease would be on average $30,000 of their reduction. So, and that has a cost to the state of $220 million cut perpetually from this budget and every budget moving forward. Representative Sinicki or Representative Clancy on the tax cut?
I was actually just looking for that chart that you put out a few days ago, because it's that graphic is really stunning. Maybe I can share my screen, or if your staff has it, I'd love to get that up there, because it does a good job of showing where this tax cut is going, and it is clearly the folks at the very top.
Yeah. We will throw that in the chat. I do see my staff is on here, and then also Justin Belinsky, who's my staff, is also on here somehow twice, which makes sense. He does a lot of work, so doing double duty. All right, Representative Sinicki, is there any questions in the chat, in the Q&A you want to jump in and grab?
Sorry, I hate being on my tablet because it's like works different than my laptop.
Okay.
I think it was Eric asked about the DEI stuff in UW. No, that was another anonymous one about the DEI stuff in UW budget. I mean, you could have people call Republican legislators, encourage them to work to get that back in, because it's my understanding that there are members in the Republican caucus who are very worried about that issue and really don't want to talk about it. So if you could push Republicans to go on record on that, that is really helpful. The Assembly will be putting forward an amendment to restore those funds, and I believe the Senate is as well. We're going to do our best, but the best advice I can give people is call your legislators, especially if you have friends and relatives in Republican districts. A lot of the Republican legislators are very squeamish on this one, and we might be able to flip a couple votes.
Yeah.
Teresa Barnes here asks, thank you for this opportunity, and you're welcome, and thanks for being here, and asks, I think she might know the answer. What is the bad news to share about support for public education? And boy, there's a lot of bad news. And in fact, the budget generally is not, as it stands now, is not good news for public ed specifically. There was a suggested increase to the per pupil allocation to about just over $300, which sounds like it's substantial. It's not. I think just to get us back in line with inflation, we'd need to be well above $1,000. I think towards a $1,500 line. There are some increases to the minimum that a district would get to spend from $10,000 to $11,000. That does not impact Milwaukee Public Schools at all. It was well above the $11,000 line already. One of the things that public education advocates have been asking for a long time is an increase to the percentage that districts get back in spending on special education. Right now, private charter schools are reimbursed 90%. And the very modest call from a lot of advocates in recent years has been 60%. This raises us just a few percentage points and gets us up to 33%. And what that means is not that Milwaukee Public Schools or other schools would be able to meet the needs of more kids with IEPs, individualized education programs. What it means is that we'd stop taking funds away from general education funds within every school in order to meet those needs. And it's that sort of massive disparity in how things are reimbursed that really has a huge impact on our schools. As a former teacher, I've seen those things firsthand, and I've seen what it looks like to be in nearly defunded classrooms, and it's not good. I mean, we need more teachers. We need to lower those teacher-student ratios, because all the data shows that is the most effective way to get to better education. And this budget, as it stands, does not do that.
Muted. Okay, and just to give a very clear where we started, where we are, kind of thing. The governor proposed an increase of 325. Or sorry, there was a proposed increase that would have gotten us to actually exceed inflation for the first time in 12 years in the per pupil for public education. What it was negotiated down to is just 325 per year for public schools. And then as Representative Clancy pointed out, there's a substantial increase for the 4 different private entities that receive public dollars with limited oversight. We do have the final numbers for those, but just I'm gonna see if we can get them published in some way quickly. If you watch my Facebook page, we will publish those today because there's a final number we finally got today after these run through a formula that has to do with the revenue limits and categorical aids. If you're not following me on Facebook already or haven't seen the Twitter, I did a whiteboard demonstration of when the per pupil increase goes through the formula and what that looks like for the voucher schools, for K-8, for 9 through 12 vouchers, and then special needs scholarships, and then also for the independent charter schools and what that increase is. We got the final numbers. They're pretty close to some of them went up a little bit, some of them went down a little bit, but it's still a very drastic increase, with the largest one being for vouchers that are high school, having that 41% increase. That stands. It's like a little less than, but it's still a huge increase that they're going to be getting. That is part of that passed already under SB 330. The other part will come through here in terms of the budget. So that is something that we'll continue to push for, and the governor was able to veto some pieces last time to come up with some extra dollars. We're hoping that he comes up with some of those again, but that is something. Part of it already went through. So that is the bad news on public education for now. Answering questions. Oh, Ryan Clancy called dibs on one. Do you want to take that on the surplus?
Yeah, a couple more little ones that I wanted to knock out. I think Lori Chagnon had asked, Clancy had mentioned 50 million for non-state funding. Could you please clarify? So I had to look into this too, because I didn't realize we could even do this, but there's in the most recent iteration, what it looks like is that normally we would pass a budget that has specific line items for specific projects. There's $50 million sitting in, I don't know if slush fund is the right terminology for it, but it's going to be funds that are specified for projects that are not like construction, things like that are not done directly by the state, but handed over to private entities that are unspecified. So because the Republicans control the committee that this would go through, they would be able to dip into that and use those funds basically for whatever they wanted. $50 million is a lot for that. And it makes me nervous to have those sorts of projects just sitting there when there's very little public oversight over where they go. But as of this morning, at least that stands. And then the other little one too, the question is from Eric Tillich, what exactly is being done with the surplus? I don't understand why our tax dollars are just sitting there. The good news is that they won't just be sitting around. They'll be given back to our richest residents. And, you know, maybe theoretically they will bless us and have them, you know, fall to the rest of us at some point. But it's an excellent question, right? We could do so much good with those $7 billion. And the original iteration of the budget did just that. It did some really common sense investments in a lot of areas. I know that a lot of the folks on this call have been to the town halls before where we've detailed that, but so much of the good that those $7 billion would have done was taken out of the budget. And it is frustrating. So yes, we've had a lot of dollars just sitting there. The goal now is to return them to people who need them the least.
Very good. And then if you are following, if you're on a phone, I know it's more difficult, or if you're like Representative Sinicki on a tablet, it's more difficult to look. But if you look under the Q&A, you can see some of the answered questions too, that my staff is jumping in and getting on. But I think those are, you can see where that is. One of them that was important: could the tax cuts be line item vetoed? And the answer, I think this is one that a lot of folks would be interested in. Tax bracket changes could be line item vetoed and revert to the current law. Governor Evers in the past, it just moved on me, right? As soon as something changed on it. Okay, and it disappeared for me. Oh, they also, there it is, tax cut. They also get a larger percentage cut, particularly, oh, no, that's not it. Governors in the past has stated that he does not support a cut to the top tax bracket. So we hope that that does continue on this one. All right. Just to kind of give, before we jump into more questions too, I saw one about the childcare piece. And I wanted to just outline what that actually looks like, because that has gotten a great deal of attention. The childcare counts was the name of the program officially. It still is. It was a federal program that was put in place post-pandemic or during the pandemic, that allowed for subsidies to go out on a grant basis. We have about 8,000, we looked into this, we have about 8,000 childcare centers through our state. Over half benefited from this program. The grants went out, they were able to pay a higher wage, attract and retain childcare workers, which was a huge problem before the pandemic. That has also helped to reduce childcare costs directly for parents who use them. That federal program is set to expire. So one of the things that Governor Evers put in his budget was to extend that childcare counts program. And that dollar amount associated with it was $341 million. Because this was cut out 3 weeks ago and still is cut out in the budget. The projection is that 2,000 childcare centers are at risk of closing. So that's about a quarter of all childcare centers, and will have to increase staffing ratios, cut staff wages, reduce childcare slots, and increase costs to families to make up for it. So, you know, if you are a parent who has their kid in childcare, I know I am, I know Representative Clancy is as well. And I know a lot of you are seeing some of the names on here. This is something you should talk to your childcare providers about, what this is going to look like. Yeah, but this is something that through February this year, about $309 million had been paid out through the Child Care Account Stabilization Program. Like I said, 4,248 childcare providers have received some support. Over 22,000 professionals who work in childcare remained employed or were hired, and over 113,000 children were able to continue care. So just thinking about what the huge implications that cascading effect, right? Just, you know, if you are a parent of older kids who are no longer in childcare, bless you, you got through. If you are still having your kids in childcare, you know what how complicated it has been to just try to get and maintain childcare. You know, those discussions that you might be having with your partner or with the kids' grandparents and other caregivers to try and balance this out. You're not alone. It's not just happening in Wisconsin, it's happening across the country. This would literally just kind of continue to make sure that people that want to be in the workforce and still be a parent can do so. By eliminating this, it really does change the math, the personal math for a lot of households, to shift to be, you know, by force to have single parent support single parent income household, because the cost of childcare is so high and so out of control. So that's huge, and I think, you know, hopefully there's something that can be done with the veto pen on that. But again, just to put that into perspective, just the tax cut for the people who are the richest in our state, if you just cut that out, that would more than pay for that childcare service, which would help provide childcare for over 100,000 people in the state. So that's one of the big ones. I saw that there was a question on that about what's going on with this. So just to give an outline of what that means. I'm just scanning it too. These funds also made possible not to pass tuition increases on. Yeah, so it was disheartening. So there you go. So answering that one. Representatives, any of them you want to call dibs on, or any programs you want to make sure to point out in the budget?
I could talk about the arts funding one. Another question from Eric Tillich. He says, Wisconsin ranks 48th in funding for the arts. Minnesota ranks in the top 10. Why can't the state be a leader in arts funding from the state? A small investment, even $1 million, would be a step forward. This is an issue that is not partisan and everyone could rally around. But the second part of that, I wish that was true. It unfortunately is partisan. In fact, what we saw as one of the terrible policy barbs in the shared revenue deal is that the amount of arts and culture and nonprofit funding that both the city and the community are able to spend has been capped. So that means that really that sort of funding has to come from the state. And there are, you're totally right, Eric. I mean, there should be much more investment from the state, from local government as